You are sitting in your room, reading a book, when suddenly your window is flooded with a brilliant flash of light. Your eyes are dazzled. Instinctively, you jump up and run to the window. This is the biggest mistake you could make. The moment you reach the glass, a shockwave shatters your window, sending glass shards flying into your face, your eyes, and your body. You collapse to the floor in agony. You are blinded and bleeding out fast. That was a fatal error. So let's start over. You are sitting in your room, reading, and suddenly your window is flooded with a brilliant flash of light. Your eyes are dazzled. However, you do not immediately run to the window because you suspect a light this intense could only be from an explosion. You know the light from an explosion travels at the speed of light, while the shockwave travels at the speed of sound, much slower. If this is indeed the explosion you fear, the shockwave will reach you and shatter your windows in a matter of seconds. Therefore, you immediately move away from the window, get behind a sturdy inner wall, drop to the floor face down, and cover your eyes and ears. Just then, the windows explode. Everything in your room flies apart. You feel the walls crack, but thankfully, the building holds. Your fear has come true. A 10-megaton thermonuclear bomb has detonated in the heart of your city, just a few miles away. That's equivalent to 667 of the Hiroshima bombs going off at the same time. What you do in the next few seconds and minutes will determine whether you survive. Now is the time to take cover. As the bomb detonates and the initial shockwave passes, panic and terror will grip your city. You may hear weeping, moaning, and screams from outside. Hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people, animals and other living things who lived in your city, have likely been vaporized and annihilated. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of buildings have been leveled. Many more people are injured and far more buildings have been damaged. But we have no time to dwell on any of this. You must reserve your grief for later. If you are still breathing, you have survived the initial effects of a nuclear bomb's heat, light, pressure, and flame. But we still have two more effects to contend with: radiation and nuclear fallout. You may only have seconds to take precautions against fallout, and if you are lucky, if the wind is not blowing in your direction, perhaps minutes. If you glance outside for just a moment, you will see a colossal mushroom cloud rapidly rising into the sky. The cloud forms because the extreme temperatures of the blast rapidly heat the surrounding air. As the heated air rises, it creates a vacuum behind it, which is then filled by cooler air. This newly drawn air also heats up and rises, and this cycle creates a tremendous upward draft that carries both the flames it creates and the dust and debris it pulls from the ground into the atmosphere. Of course, the gases that meet the colder upper layers of the atmosphere quickly disperse, spreading out in all directions as if hitting a barrier, bending downward to form the top of that rising mushroom. It begins to break, but the mushroom cap becomes rounder as it is drawn towards the void in the blast column. All of this creates a frightening and captivating sight, but do not be mesmerized by its majesty, and do not freeze where you are. As we will see later, species do not just enter flight or fight mode in the face of terror and fear. There is a third response: freezing. It will be very difficult to resist, but you must not freeze. This mushroom cloud will rise 18 miles 30 kilometers in the coming seconds, reaching 48 miles 77 kilometers high and 6 miles 10 kilometers thick in the next few minutes. As we discussed in the previous atomic bomb video, the height at which the bomb is detonated will determine the amount and direction of radiation spread, along with the current weather conditions and the quantity and purity of the fuel used in the bomb. If the building you are in has not collapsed, you are likely far enough away from the blast point, meaning the radioactive particles scattered at the moment of the explosion have either not reached you or, if they have, you have received a dose well below the 100 gram level. The good news is, you will probably not die immediately. The bad news is, you must watch out for certain symptoms. In the coming minutes, you may experience symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, dizziness, fever, fatigue, and hair loss. All of these point to acute radiation syndrome, ARS. Your chance of survival will be determined by the severity of the symptoms. Your risk of death has not yet passed, but there is little you can do. If you were prepared for an explosion, you can start taking the potassium iodide salts or tablets found in your emergency kit, as indicated on the prospectus. Since this clean iodine binds to the cells in your thyroid gland, when radioactive iodine produced during the nuclear reaction enters your body, it cannot bind to these cells, slightly reducing your risk of radiation poisoning. Of course, these tablets cannot protect you against all the effects of radiation. For example, you will need to drink plenty of water. Therefore, if your water supply is still working, it will be helpful to be near a water source in your home. Unfortunately, depending on your distance from the blast center, you may have received a radiation dose that increases your cancer risk hundreds of times, and the likelihood of your children being born with health problems may have already increased. However, none of these are problems you can think about right now. If you are inside, you must immediately start isolating your home. Absolutely do not attempt to go outside. Just being inside a building protects you by about 50% from the blast effects. If possible, try to move to the homes of your neighbors on the middle floors. Ground floors and attics are the most dangerous places, as most of the radioactive particles scattered from the explosion into the sky will accumulate here. Wherever you are, try to seal off any air paths into your house with whatever materials you can find. For example, if your table is wooden, break it if necessary, and try to cover your broken windows with the boards you take from it. Try to close the gaps between the door and the frame as much as possible with blankets. Also, be sure to cover ventilation openings under doors and fireplaces to ensure no air is entering through these gaps. On the other hand, you must remember the risk of fire in buildings, because as we mentioned before, many buildings and materials may have been exposed to temperatures above the ignition point due to both the pressure wave and the fireball emitted from the explosion. For these reasons, having a working fire extinguisher nearby will be very beneficial. You will not be able to go outside for at least 24 hours, likely 48 hours. Therefore, it is useful to store and accumulate food and drinks in a safe place for this 1 or 2 day period. Please do not attempt to go outside. Paradoxically, the most deadly effects of radiation do not last for years. 50% of the radioactive fallout will have decayed and lost its effect within 1 hour after the explosion. I say 24 hours because 80% of the fallout effects will be gone within the first day. However, if we have enough food and water and help has not yet arrived, you may choose to wait for at least 2 weeks, as 99% of all radiation will have passed by then. But please remember that radiation is not something that acts like a bullet. If you are hit by a bullet, the effect is immediate, but radiation is something that accumulates in the body. Therefore, the radiation we receive at any single moment may not be very meaningful on its own. What is important is understanding how much radiation you receive during periods like an hour, a day, or a year. These accumulate and add up, so even if the radiation levels drop to less than 1% after 2 to 3 weeks, if you took a high dose of radiation at the moment of the explosion, this level is still much higher than normal and can combine with the initial radiation to make you sick. Therefore, the longer you can stay in a place where your safety is ensured, the better. And do not forget the dynamics of nuclear war, because the probability of only one atomic bomb being dropped is almost zero. Unfortunately, since the logic of nuclear attack is all or nothing, remember that a large number of bombs could be launched. What if you were outside and survived the blast? Actually, it won't be much different. Of course, the risk for those outside is seeing the moment of the explosion with their own eyes. If you saw the bomb falling from the sky for some reason and witnessed the moment of detonation, you will unfortunately experience temporary blindness, as you will have been fooled by a new and much more powerful sun. If the explosion occurred during the day and you are far enough away, this blindness should pass in a few minutes. But if it occurred at night and you are very close to the blast, you may not be able to see anything for 30 to 40 minutes, and this will severely limit your movements. Unfortunately, this significantly reduces your chance of survival. Therefore, I know this is an absurd suggestion, but if you see a ball falling from the sky, it might be best to curb your curiosity, especially in these times when we have never been so close to nuclear war. But no matter what, if you are outside, you must do one of two things: either get away from the blast area as quickly as possible, or immediately go inside or into a shelter. A quick way to decide which one to do is to fully extend your arm after the blast is complete and the mushroom cloud is more or less formed. Close one eye and try to cover the mushroom cloud with your thumb. If your thumb can completely cover the mushroom cloud, you are far enough away, and it would be best to get to a place where you can get help, either by car, walking quickly, or running. Needless to say, if the mushroom cloud starts moving, you must go. If you have a car, you may prefer to use it, but remember that roads will be closed and we are likely to be unable to proceed due to traffic. If you encounter such an obstacle, immediately get out of your car and try to find an enclosed space. Do not try to protect yourself inside the car. The thin metal of your car cannot protect you. Keep these numbers in mind. To protect yourself from 99% of the radiation emitted by the blast, you need to shelter under at least 5 inches of steel, 16 inches of brick, or 24 inches 60 centimeters of soil. If your thumb does not cover the mushroom cloud, you are too close to the blast and have likely received a high dose of radiation. If you notice dust and ash falling around you, try to cover your mouth and nose with the thickest cloth you can find and immediately run inside. As soon as you enter a sheltered place, carefully remove all your clothes. Do not rush while taking off your clothes. Do not scatter the dust that has accumulated on your garments. Put your clothes in a bag and throw it outside. Never keep it inside the house. If the water is running, immediately take a shower, because both your clothes and your skin are likely covered with radioactive particles. Even if you cannot see it from the outside, scrub your body thoroughly with soap and water in the shower, but make sure you do not cut your skin. If radioactive particles enter your bloodstream, you could face a serious problem. If the water is not working and you have access to some water, wet a cloth and carefully wipe your body. An important detail here is communication. An atomic bomb, as we have discussed before, can disrupt the electrical and communication network and even collapse a country. The best way to find out what is happening is with battery-powered radios. It is also very important to prepare tools like a whistle, which should be in every emergency bag. Just like in an earthquake, you could be trapped under a collapsed building in a nuclear attack. In fact, our building could collapse later due to the damage it sustained initially. As you can see, even a single bomb can cause as much destruction as an actual environmental catastrophe. This will of course affect the dynamics I have described here. There are many factors, and it is impossible for me to explain all of them. But if you are in a country with its own nuclear bombs, the likelihood of the enemy attacking your country with atomic bombs is lower, because you can wipe the attacking party off the map with counterattacks before the bombs even reach your country. This is what we call the second strike advantage in warfare. If the country you attack has atomic bombs, you need to be sure that you have destroyed them in the first strike. If you cannot do that, you are in trouble, and the difficulty of destroying an entire country is obvious. This is why nuclear bombs, despite all their terrifying appearances, have a deterrent effect against nuclear war. According to international agreements, such a bomb should never be used, but if it is, civilians should be warned beforehand. If such a warning occurs, you should of course either leave the city or move into a shelter. We said sheltering at home reduces the effects by up to 50%. A shelter built just one floor underground can reduce the effects of a nuclear attack by about 90%. The deeper our shelter, the less the effects. So the more prepared you are for such an attack, the higher your chances of survival. On the screen, you can find the items we recommend you have in your emergency kit to be prepared for a nuclear attack. But no matter what you do, the effects of such a bomb last for decades. The cities where the bomb was dropped may become uninhabitable for years, and cleanup efforts will take months. Depending on where the bomb was launched, widespread economic, psychological, and sociological collapses occur. Since water and food sources will contain radiation, it will take a very long time for these processes to recover. Many newborns in the region would experience diseases and disabilities. Thousands of people would suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Tens of thousands of cancer cases would occur. Fighting just these things would cost tens of billions of dollars, and doing so in a collapsed economy would be very difficult. Look, I repeat, we are talking about a single bomb here. This should not be a risk that humanity accepts. That is why we must raise awareness, inform our surroundings, and ensure that such bombs are never used, or even better, never produced again, and that we are sure they are dismantled. Because once an arrow leaves the bow, or once one of these bombs is dropped from a plane, there is no turning back. See you in the next video. Goodbye.